Imagine this, you're 6 months pregnant, lying on the ultrasound table, heart swelling with joy as you see your miracle baby on the screen. But then, a single text message shatters your world, revealing a 2-year betrayal by your husband and best friend, plotting to steal your fortune, your child, and your sanity. What starts as a devastating discovery spirals into a high-stakes revenge saga filled with embezzlement, fake identities, international chases, and a mother's unbreakable fight for justice. Will Sophia rise from the ashes, or will the shadows of conspiracy consume her forever? Stick around as I dive deep into Betrayed Billions, a pregnant wife's revenge, a story so gripping, you won't believe it's fiction. If this hooked you, hit that like button if you're Team Sophia, comment your biggest plot twist prediction, share with a friend who loves drama, and subscribe for more epic story breakdowns. Let's uncover the truth together. Sophia Hartwell adjusted her designer maternity dress as she lay on the examination table, her 6-month pregnant belly prominent beneath the thin hospital gown. The ultrasound gel was cold against her skin, but her heart was warm with anticipation. After 3 miscarriages, this pregnancy had been a miracle. "There's your beautiful baby, Doctor," Martinez smiled, pointing to the screen where their daughter's profile was clearly visible. "Everything looks perfect. Mrs. Hartwell, she's growing beautifully." Sophia's eyes filled with happy tears as she watched her unborn daughter move on the monitor. At 38, she had almost given up hope of becoming a mother. Richard had been so supportive through their fertility struggles, holding her through each loss, promising they would never give up. The baby's heartbeat filled the room with its steady rhythm when Richard's phone buzzed on the counter beside them. He had stepped out to take what he called an urgent business call, leaving his phone behind in his rush. The message notification lit up the screen, and Sophia's world collapsed in an instant. "Can't wait for our Tuscany trip, my love. The villa you booked looks absolutely divine. I'm already packed and ready for 2 weeks of paradise with you. Love you more than words can say, Emma." The heart emoji that followed felt like a knife twisting in Sophia's chest. Emma Sterling, her college roommate, her best friend for over 20 years. The woman who had held Sophia's hand through every miscarriage, who had celebrated this pregnancy with champagne while Sophia sipped sparkling cider, who had helped her design the nursery just last week. Sophia's hands trembled as she reached for the phone, her pregnant belly making the movement awkward. "Dr. Martinez was speaking, something about the baby's measurements and next appointments, but the words sounded distant and muffled, as if she were underwater. With shaking fingers, she scrolled through the message thread. What she found made her physically ill. "Missing you already after last night. You make me feel alive in ways Richard never could." This message was from Emma, sent just yesterday. Richard's response: "2 more months until the baby comes, and we can start the divorce proceedings. Helena Richardson already has the papers drawn up. Sophia will get enough money to disappear quietly and raise the child somewhere far from New York. Then we can finally be together openly." Another message from Emma: "I still can't believe she has no idea we've been planning this for 2 years. She's so trusting, so naive. Sometimes I almost feel bad for her." "Don't feel bad," Richard had replied. "You've been the perfect friend, gathering all the evidence we need about her spending habits and emotional instability. The courts will see she's unfit for shared custody of significant assets. Besides, she'll be better off with a simple life. All this wealth and social pressure has never suited her anyway." Sophia felt the baby kick inside her, as if responding to her mother's distress. The irony was devastating. Here she was, looking at her miracle baby on the ultrasound screen, while simultaneously discovering that her husband and best friend had been systematically planning to destroy her life. The messages continued, each one more devastating than the last. Photos from romantic dinners she thought Richard was attending for business. Screenshots of hotel receipts from trips Emma claimed were work conferences. Detailed discussions about Sophia's therapy sessions, which Emma had encouraged her to attend for postpartum preparation, but which Richard was planning to use as evidence of mental instability. "Mrs. Hartwell, are you all right?" Dr. Martinez's concerned voice broke through her shock. "You look very pale." Sophia tried to speak, but only managed to whisper. I think I need... Can you get my husband, please?" But even as she said the words, she realized Richard wasn't her husband anymore. Maybe he never really had been. How long had this betrayal been going on? The messages dated back 2 years, which meant Emma had been actively sabotaging her marriage while pretending to be her closest friend and biggest supporter. Rain began pelting the hospital window, matching the tears that had started flowing down Sophia's cheeks. She thought about all those times Emma had been so interested in Richard's business, asking detailed questions about his investments and partnerships. All those girls' nights where Emma had encouraged Sophia to share her deepest fears and insecurities about her marriage and her ability to be a good mother. The pregnancy complications she'd experienced in her second trimester suddenly made sense too. The stress she'd attributed to normal pregnancy anxiety had actually been her subconscious picking up on the betrayal happening right under her nose. "I need to use the bathroom," Sophia managed to say, sliding off the examination table carefully. In the privacy of the small restroom, she allowed herself to fully break down. Her pregnant wife's financial betrayal was complete and devastating. This wasn't just infidelity. This was a calculated destruction of her entire life, orchestrated by the two people she trusted most in the world. Through the thin walls, she could hear Richard's voice in the hallway, talking on his phone. His tone was loving and intimate in a way he hadn't used with her in months. "Don't worry, Emma, once the baby's born, we'll handle the divorce papers. She'll get enough to disappear quietly. Helena Richardson assures me the prenup is ironclad, and with all the evidence you've gathered about her shopping and emotional problems, custody won't be an issue. $2 million in minimal visitation rights. She should be grateful." Sophia pressed her hand against her mouth to muffle a sob. $2 million after 15 years of marriage and building his empire together. Minimal visitation rights to her own daughter. They had planned everything, down to the exact amount of money they thought would buy her silence and compliance. But as she looked at herself in the mirror, something fierce awakened in her eyes. She was Sophia Hartwell, and she had not survived 3 miscarriages and built a life worth $50 million to be destroyed by a cheating husband and a backstabbing best friend. She pulled out her own phone and began photographing Richard's messages, her hands steadier now with purpose. If Richard and Emma wanted to play games with evidence and documentation, they had chosen the wrong woman to underestimate. When she emerged from the bathroom, Richard was back in the room, his phone safely tucked away, his expression the picture of concerned husband. "Darling, Dr. Martinez said you weren't feeling well. Is everything okay with the baby?" Looking at him now, Sophia could see what she had missed before, the guilt in his eyes that she had attributed to work stress, the way he checked his phone constantly, protecting it like a secret, the new cologne that she had complimented, never realizing it was chosen by another woman. "Everything's perfect with the baby," she said carefully. "She's healthy and strong, growing beautifully." "That's wonderful news." Richard smiled, but Sophia noticed he didn't meet her eyes. "I was thinking, maybe Emma could help you finish setting up the nursery this weekend. She has such good taste, and you've been so tired lately." The casual cruelty of it took Sophia's breath away. Even now, he was setting up opportunities for Emma to gather more information, to continue the betrayal right under Sophia's nose. "That's very thoughtful," Sophia replied, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "I'll call her tonight." As they left the hospital, Sophia's mind was already working. She thought about Alicia Florrick from The Good Wife, how she had discovered her husband's corruption and built a new life from the ashes of betrayal. Was this her Alicia Florrick moment? But unlike Alicia, Sophia wasn't going to wait for the scandal to break publicly. She was going to take control of her own story. The drive home was quiet, Richard humming softly to himself, probably thinking about his upcoming Tuscany trip with Emma. Sophia stared out at the rain-soaked streets of Manhattan, watching the city she had called home for 15 years blur past the window. By the time they reached their $50 million penthouse, Sophia had made her decision. Richard and Emma thought they were playing chess with her life, but they had just taught the wrong woman how to play the game. The next morning, Sophia sat across from Emma at their usual table at Café Sabarsky, secretly grateful for the elegant Austrian coffeehouse's intimate atmosphere. She had chosen this location carefully, public enough that Emma wouldn't suspect anything unusual, but quiet enough for the conversation she was about to record. Emma looked radiant, her blonde hair perfectly styled, wearing a designer dress that Sophia now realized probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. How had she never questioned where Emma got the money for such an expensive lifestyle on her supposed nonprofit salary? "You're glowing, Mama." Emma smiled, reaching across to squeeze Sophia's hand. "How did the ultrasound go yesterday? I've been dying to hear about our little princess." The casual possessiveness in the word "our" made Sophia's stomach turn. She managed a smile while discreetly activating the recording app on her phone. "She's perfect, growing right on schedule." Richard was so excited. "I bet he was. He's going to be such a wonderful father." Emma's eyes sparkled with what Sophia now recognized as the secret knowledge of her betrayal. "Speaking of Richard, how are things between you two? You seemed a little stressed at dinner last week." Here it was, the fishing expedition. Emma probing for information to use against her, just like she had been doing for 2 years. "Actually, Emma, I wanted to talk to you about Richard." Sophia leaned forward, her voice low. "I found something on his phone yesterday. Messages between him and another woman." Emma's face went through a fascinating series of micro-expressions: surprise, concern, and something that looked almost like excitement. "Oh, honey, no. What kind of messages?" Emma reached for Sophia's hands again, her touch now feeling like a spider's web. "Are you sure you're not reading too much into work correspondence? You know how paranoid pregnancy hormones can make us feel? These weren't work messages, Emma. They were love letters, explicit photos, hotel receipts, 2 years worth of an affair." Emma's grip on her hands tightened. That's terrible, Sophia. I can't believe Richard would do that to you, especially now. Who is she? Do you know her?" The performance was flawless, Sophia had to admit. If she hadn't seen the messages herself, she would have been completely convinced by Emma's shocked concern. "Her name is Emma," Sophia said quietly, watching her friend's face. For just a moment, Emma's mask slipped. Her eyes widened with genuine panic before she quickly recovered. "Emma, what a coincidence. It must be someone else named Emma. There are so many Emmas in New York, especially in Richard's business circles." "Emma Sterling, ring any bells?" The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Emma's face went pale, then flushed red, then settled into something Sophia had never seen before: cold calculation. "How long have you known?" Emma asked. Her voice completely changed. "Since yesterday, during our baby's ultrasound. Actually, your message about Tuscany interrupted the most beautiful moment of my life." Emma leaned back in her chair, and for the first time in 20 years of friendship, Sophia saw her clearly, the predator beneath the caring friend mask. "I'm not going to apologize," Emma said calmly. "You want to know the truth? Fine, Richard and I have been planning this for 2 years. This isn't some sordid affair. Sophia, this is a business decision." "A business decision?" Sophia's voice rose slightly, drawing glances from nearby tables. "Keep your voice down." Emma's tone was sharp now, authoritative. "You really think Richard fell in love with some nonprofit director from his charity board? I'm a strategic consultant, Sophia. I specialize in hostile takeovers of family wealth." The words hit Sophia like physical blows. "What are you talking about?" Emma pulled out her phone and began showing Sophia photos. Pictures of Sophia shopping, seemingly normal moments that had been carefully staged and photographed to look excessive and frivolous. "Richard hired me to document your spending habits. your emotional instability, your complete dependence on his wealth. Do you have any idea how easy you made this? All those therapy sessions you told me about? Thinking I was being a supportive friend? Every insecurity you shared, every fear about motherhood, every worry about your marriage, I documented it all. Sophia felt like she was drowning. But we were friends, college roommates. You were in my wedding. I was recruited your senior year of college. Sophia, Richard was already planning for the long game. Even then, he knew he'd need an inside source eventually, someone you trusted completely. The friendship was real enough, but it was always secondary to the job. The revelation was so monstrous that Sophia almost couldn't process it. Her entire adult life had been built on a lie. Why? She whispered. Because Richard Hartwell is worth $800 million, and you're just the first wife. There will be others after me. Probably. But right now, I'm the one positioned to inherit the empire, and you're the obstacle that needs to be removed cleanly. Emma leaned forward, her voice taking on an almost gentle tone that was somehow more terrifying than her earlier coldness. Look, this doesn't have to be ugly. Sophia, you'll get your $2 million. You can move somewhere quiet, maybe Connecticut or upstate. Raise your daughter in peace. You were never really cut out for this lifestyle anyway. All the charity galas and social politics stressed you out. This is actually a kindness. And if I don't go quietly, Emma's smile was razor sharp, then we use all the evidence I've gathered over the past 2 years to prove you're an unfit mother with serious mental health issues and a dangerous spending addiction. Richard's legal team is very, very good. Sophia, Helena Richardson has never lost a case like this. Sophia felt her baby kick, a strong movement that seemed to say, "Fight back, Mama." She looked at Emma, this stranger wearing her best friend's face, and realized that her comfortable life was over, but her real life was just beginning. "I need to go," Sophia said, standing carefully. "Think about what I said, Sophia. The easy way is better for everyone, especially the baby." As Sophia walked out of the cafe, she heard Emma making a phone call behind her. "Richard, she knows. Yes, she took it about as well as we expected. No, I don't think she'll be a problem. She's too soft to fight us properly." But Emma Sterling had made a crucial mistake. She had underestimated the strength of a pregnant woman who has just discovered that her entire life was a lie. As Sophia walked through the rain-soaked streets of the Upper East Side, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years: absolute clarity. By the time she reached her penthouse, Sophia had already mentally composed the first entry in what would become her own version of Eat, Pray, Love, except her journey wouldn't be about finding herself through travel and meditation. It would be about finding herself through war. She opened her laptop and began typing, "Day 1 of the rest of my life. Today I learned that my husband and best friend have been systematically destroying my life for 2 years. They think I'm too soft to fight back. They're about to learn how wrong they are." But when she walked into her bedroom, she found Richard packing a suitcase, and her lawyer Helena Richardson sitting in the chair by the window, holding a thick folder of documents. "Hello, Sophia," Helena said gently. "I think it's time we had a conversation." Helena Richardson's reputation preceded her into every room she entered. Manhattan's most ruthless divorce attorney, she had destroyed more marriages and fortunes than a financial crisis. Seeing her in Sophia's bedroom, holding divorce papers like a weapon, was surreal. "I assume Emma filled you in on the basics," Helena said, gesturing for Sophia to sit on the edge of her own bed. "This will be much easier if we can handle everything civilly." Richard continued packing, avoiding Sophia's eyes. She noticed he was taking the expensive suits, the custom shoes, the jewelry she had given him for anniversaries, erasing their life together with methodical precision. "The prenuptial agreement you signed is quite clear," Helena continued, opening the folder. "In the event of divorce, you receive $2 million and the house in the Hamptons. Richard retains all business assets, the Manhattan properties, and the international holdings. Sophia's hands instinctively moved to her belly, protecting her daughter from the conversation that would determine her future. "What about custody?" she asked quietly. "Standard visitation. Every other weekend, alternating holidays. Richard will have primary custody, of course, given his superior financial resources and your documented emotional instability." "What documented emotional instability?" Helena smiled the way a shark might smile before attacking. "Your therapy sessions with Dr. Patricia Wells, very detailed records of postpartum anxiety, depression, fears about your adequacy as a mother. Emma Sterling provided us with extensive documentation of your concerning behavior over the past 2 years." The betrayal kept layering itself, deeper and more devastating with each revelation. Even her therapy, her attempt to be the best possible mother, had been weaponized against her. "I was in therapy to prepare for motherhood, to deal with my pregnancy after multiple miscarriages. That's not instability. That's responsible self-care. That's not how it will appear in court, especially combined with your excessive spending patterns and social anxiety at public events." Helena spread photographs across the bed like tarot cards predicting doom. Sophia shopping for baby clothes, buying groceries, picking up prescriptions. Normal activities transformed into evidence of financial irresponsibility through careful cropping and context manipulation. "This is insane," Sophia breathed, looking at pictures of herself that had been turned into lies. "This is divorce in Manhattan," Helena corrected. "Richard has been very generous with the settlement offer. $2 million is more than most women in your position receive." "My position, I helped build this fortune. I've been married to Richard for 15 years. You've been financially dependent on Richard for 15 years. Helena corrected. "You have no career, no independent income, no assets in your own name. Everything you think of as yours actually belongs to your husband." The rain continued beating against the penthouse windows, matching the assault on Sophia's understanding of her own life. She had thought she was a partner in building an empire. Instead, she had been a well-kept possession. Richard finally spoke, his voice carefully controlled. "Sophia, this doesn't have to be adversarial. You'll be comfortable with $2 million. You can buy a nice house somewhere quiet. Focus on raising Grace. You were never really happy with all the social pressures anyway." It was almost word for word what Emma had said at the cafe. They had rehearsed this, planned every argument and response. "Grace!" Sophia's voice was sharp. "You've already named our daughter. We thought Grace Hartwell had a nice sound," Richard said, still not meeting her eyes. "Grace Sterling Hartwell, actually, since Emma will be her stepmother." The casual cruelty of it took Sophia's breath away. They had planned out her daughter's entire life, with Emma in the mother role and Sophia relegated to weekend visits. "I need time to think about this," Sophia said finally. "Of course," Helena replied, checking her expensive watch. "You have 48 hours to accept the settlement offer. After that, we file for divorce and custody based on the evidence we've gathered. I should warn you, fighting this will only make things more expensive and more public. The press loves a story about an unstable socialite losing custody of her child." After they left, Sophia sat alone in her bedroom, surrounded by the wreckage of her life. The ultrasound photos from yesterday were still on her nightstand, showing her beautiful daughter, unaware of the battle being fought for her future. She called the one person she trusted completely, her mother, Diane, in Phoenix. "Mom, I need you to come to New York. Today, if possible." "Sophia, what's wrong?" "Honey, you sound terrible. Richard is divorcing me, and Emma has been working with him for 2 years, planning this whole thing." The silence on the other end of the line lasted so long that Sophia thought the call had dropped. "That son of a bitch," Diane finally said, her voice deadly quiet. "I'm booking a flight right now. Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. And don't you dare believe a word they've told you about what you deserve." After hanging up, Sophia walked to her walk-in closet and looked at the life Richard and Helena claimed was evidence of her excessive spending. Designer maternity clothes she had bought for charity events. Shoes she had purchased for galas that raised millions for children's hospitals. Jewelry Richard had given her for anniversaries and birthdays. Every single purchase had been made with Richard's knowledge and approval. Many had been made at his specific request, but twisted through Helena's presentation, they became evidence of a woman out of control. She was staring at her wedding dress, preserved in museum-quality storage, when her phone rang. Dr. Patricia Wells, her therapist. Sophia, I need to see you immediately. Something very disturbing has happened with your confidential records. 30 minutes later, Sophia sat in Dr. Wells's office, learning the final piece of her systematic destruction. Someone has been requesting copies of our session notes, Dr. Wells explained, her face grave. They claim to be conducting a psychological evaluation for custody purposes. I refused, of course, but I'm concerned about how they knew about our sessions at all. Emma knew. I told her about our appointments, about what we discussed. I thought she was being supportive. Dr. Wells leaned forward, her expression intense. Sophia, I need you to understand something very important. Everything we discussed in our sessions was about your strength, your resilience, your determination to be the best possible mother after loss. There is nothing in my notes that would support claims of instability or unfitness. But Helena Richardson said, Helena Richardson lied, or Emma Sterling gave her false information about our sessions. Either way, this is a deliberate misrepresentation of your mental health record. For the first time since yesterday's ultrasound appointment, Sophia felt a spark of hope. Can you testify to that? Absolutely. And Sophia, midlife isn't about what you've lost. It's about who you're becoming. You're becoming a mother and a fighter. Don't let them convince you otherwise. As Sophia left Dr. Wells' office, she felt something shifting inside her. The woman who had walked into that ultrasound appointment yesterday was gone. In her place was someone harder, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous than Richard and Emma had calculated. She had 36 hours left to accept their settlement offer. She planned to use every single one of those hours to become the opponent they had never expected her to be. But first, she needed to find out exactly what Richard had been hiding in those offshore accounts Helena had mentioned so casually. If they wanted to play games with evidence and documentation, Sophia was about to become a very quick study. The war for her daughter's future was just beginning. At 3 in the morning, Sophia found herself standing in Richard's home office, 6 months pregnant and wide awake with purpose. Her husband was at his emergency business meeting, which she now understood was probably a romantic dinner with Emma. And the penthouse was silent except for the distant hum of Manhattan traffic. Maria Santos, their housekeeper for the past 8 years, appeared in the doorway like a guardian angel in her nightgown. Mrs. Sophia, you should be sleeping. It's not good for the baby. All this stress. Maria, I need your help with something. But it could be dangerous for you. If Richard finds out. Maria stepped into the office and closed the door firmly behind her. Mr. Richard is not a good man. Mrs. Sophia, I have been watching, listening. I know things. What kind of things? Come, I show you. Maria led Sophia to the far wall of the office, behind Richard's massive mahogany desk. What Sophia had always assumed was decorative wood paneling was actually a cleverly concealed safe. He thinks I don't see him open this, but Maria sees everything in this house. The combination is Grace's due date. Sophia's hands trembled as she entered the numbers. The fact that Richard had used their daughter's birth date as his safe combination felt like another violation, weaponizing her pregnancy even in his secret keeping. The safe opened to reveal files that would change everything. The first folder contained documents from the Hartwell Foundation, the children's charity that Sophia had helped establish and run for the past 5 years. Page after page of financial records showed systematic embezzlement. Millions of dollars meant for orphanages and children's hospitals had been diverted to shell companies and offshore accounts. Oh God, Sophia whispered, recognizing her own signature on several of the documents. I signed these. I authorized these transfers. I thought we were sending money directly to the facilities. You did not know, Maria said firmly. You have good heart. You trust. The second folder was even worse. Art acquisition receipts from European galleries. But the invoices were clearly falsified. Sophia recognized Emma's handwriting on several of the authentication certificates. They had been using the art market to launder money, creating fake purchases and sales to move funds internationally. But it was the third folder that broke Sophia's heart completely. Financial records going back 7 years, showing systematic transfers from her personal trust fund, money her grandmother had left her, into Richard's business accounts. Money that was supposed to be untouchable, protected for their future children. He stole from my grandmother's trust, Sophia said, tears streaming down her face. Money that was meant for Grace's education, for her future. He's been stealing from our daughter since before she was even conceived. Maria reached for Sophia's shoulders, steadying her. Mrs. Sophia, this is why you must fight, not just for you, but for baby Grace. This money belongs to her. But the most devastating discovery was at the bottom of the safe, a thick file labeled Project Sophia. It contained detailed psychological profiles, spending analyses, and what appeared to be a timeline for her systematic destruction. Emma's neat handwriting documented everything. Subject increasingly isolated from outside friendships through careful scheduling conflicts and subtle social manipulation. Subject's dependency on validation from husband and primary friend relationship makes her vulnerable to gaslighting regarding her own perceptions and memories. There were photographs Sophia didn't remember being taken. Candid shots of her looking tired, overwhelmed, or emotional, carefully cataloged with dates and circumstances. Emma had been building a case against her for years, documenting every moment of human vulnerability as evidence of instability. But there were also transcripts that made Sophia's blood run cold. Conversations between Richard and Emma from over 2 years ago, discussing Phase 1 isolation and Phase 2 documentation and Phase 3 legal preparation. She's more fragile than we anticipated, Emma had written. The miscarriages left her desperate for validation and terrified of abandonment. If we can convince her that she's failing as a wife and potential mother, she'll be more likely to accept a minimal settlement just to avoid public judgment. Richard's response was clinical. The trust fund money should be fully integrated into the business accounts within 6 months. Once the pregnancy reaches viability, we can accelerate the timeline. Helena Richardson is confident we can limit custody to supervised visitation only if we can demonstrate serious emotional instability. Sophia felt her daughter kick, a strong movement that seemed to say, "Fight for us, Mama." Maria, can you make copies of all of this? Already done, Mrs. Sophia. I have been making copies for months, keeping them safe. I know this day would come. Why didn't you tell me sooner? You were not ready to see? Sometimes the heart must break completely before it can become strong enough for war. As they carefully returned the documents to the safe, Sophia's phone buzzed with a text from James Mitchell, an investigative journalist she had met at a charity event months ago. She remembered him as being kind, intelligent, and refreshingly uninterested in her husband's money. Sophia, I know this might seem random, but I've been investigating financial irregularities in several Manhattan charities. The Hartwell Foundation has come up in my research. Would you be willing to meet for coffee? I think there might be something you need to know. The timing felt like destiny. Sophia quickly typed back, tomorrow morning, Cafe Grumpy on 20th Street. And James, I have information you're going to want to see. She spent the rest of the night in her daughter's nursery, surrounded by the beautiful rooms she and Emma had designed together. Every detail now felt contaminated by the betrayal. The rocking chair where Emma had suggested they could co-parent together. The bookshelf filled with children's books Emma had recommended. Even the mobile hanging over the crib, with its delicate butterflies, felt like a symbol of how beautiful lies could be. But as Sophia sat there, reading You Are a Badass by Jen Sincero, a book her mother had sent her months ago that she had never found time to read, she felt something powerful awakening inside her. She wasn't the helpless, emotionally unstable woman Richard and Emma had tried to create. She was a woman who had survived multiple miscarriages and still had the courage to hope for a child. She was a woman who had raised millions of dollars for children's charities, even if those funds had been stolen. She was a woman who had built a social network and reputation that Richard and Emma now needed to systematically destroy because they recognized its power. By dawn, Sophia had a plan. Richard and Emma thought they were playing chess, moving her around the board like a helpless pawn. But they had made a critical error. They had taught her the rules of their game, and now she was ready to play. When Richard returned home at 7 in the morning, clearly having spent the night with Emma, he found Sophia in the kitchen making breakfast, looking calmer than she had in days. "Good morning, darling," she said cheerfully. "I've been thinking about Helena's offer. You're right. $2 million is quite generous. I think I'm ready to sign the papers." Richard's relief was palpable. "That's wonderful, Sophia. I knew you'd see reason. This is really the best outcome for everyone, especially the baby. I have one small request, though. I'd like to use some of the settlement money to make a final donation to the Hartwell Foundation. For the children, maybe $50,000. Of course, Richard agreed quickly, probably calculating that $50,000 was a small price to pay for her cooperation. "That's very generous of you." But Sophia wasn't feeling generous. She was feeling strategic, because when she made that donation, she was going to make sure it went directly through James Mitchell's investigation, and every single financial irregularity in the foundation was going to be exposed. The game had officially begun, and Richard and Emma had no idea they were no longer playing against the woman they thought they had destroyed. They were playing against the woman they had accidentally created, someone with nothing left to lose and everything to protect. The doorbell rang, interrupting her thoughts. Through the intercom, she heard a voice that made her blood freeze. "NYPD, we have a warrant for Mrs. Sophia Hartwell's arrest in connection with embezzlement from the Hartwell Foundation." Emma's voice came through clearly from the hallway behind the officers. "I'm so sorry this had to happen, Richard, but we can't let her destroy the foundation's reputation with her instability. The children need to be protected." As the handcuffs clicked around Sophia's wrists, she realized that Richard and Emma had just made their biggest mistake yet. They had underestimated how strong a woman becomes when she discovers she's been fighting for her life without even knowing it. The real war was about to begin. The psychiatric evaluation facility felt like a prison disguised as a hospital. Sophia sat in the sterile intake room, still wearing her silk pajamas from the morning arrest, watching Emma Sterling systematically destroy her life from the other side of bulletproof glass. Emma was playing the concerned friend to perfection, tearfully explaining to the psychiatric staff how Sophia had become increasingly erratic and paranoid during her pregnancy. She had brought photo evidence, the same manipulated images Helena Richardson had shown Sophia, now presented as documentation of a woman in crisis. "She's been claiming that her husband and I are having an affair," Emma sobbed convincingly to Dr. Harrison, the facility director. "She's been accessing private financial records, making wild accusations about embezzlement. Richard is terrified she might hurt herself or the baby." Through the glass, Sophia could see Richard nodding gravely, playing the concerned husband who had been forced to make an impossible decision to protect his unstable wife and unborn child. The 72-hour psychiatric hold meant Sophia couldn't contact anyone, couldn't access her accounts, couldn't fight back while Emma moved into her penthouse and began the final phase of her takeover. "Mrs. Hartwell," Dr. Harrison said gently, settling across from her in the small interview room. "Your husband and friend are very concerned about your state of mind. They've provided documentation of some concerning behaviors. Dr. Harrison, I need you to understand something very clearly. Everything Emma Sterling told you is a lie. She and my husband have been planning this for 2 years. The financial records I accessed are from my own home, documenting actual embezzlement from my charity. I understand you believe that, Mrs. Hartwell, but paranoid delusions, especially during pregnancy, can feel very real to the person experiencing them." Sophia felt her daughter kick, as if responding to her mother's stress. The irony was devastating. She was being held as mentally unstable for discovering the truth about her systematic betrayal. "Can you contact Dr. Patricia Wells? She's my therapist. She can verify my mental state." "Dr. Wells is out of the country at a conference. She won't be available for evaluation until next week." Of course she was. Emma had planned this perfectly, right down to Dr. Wells' absence. That night, lying on the narrow bed in her temporary room, Sophia met her fellow patients. Women from all walks of life, each with her own story of betrayal and systematic destruction. Linda, a 60-year-old teacher, had been committed by her adult children who wanted to sell her house and put her in managed care. "They convinced everyone I was getting dementia because I questioned some suspicious financial transactions. Turns out my son had been forging my signature on loans." Sarah, a young mother like Sophia, had been committed by her ex-husband during their custody battle. "He documented every time I cried, every moment of postpartum anxiety, and used it to prove I was unstable. I haven't seen my kids in 3 months." The stories were hauntingly similar. Women whose natural responses to stress and betrayal had been weaponized against them by people who wanted to control their resources or children. "The system is designed to believe the person with the most money and the best lawyer," Linda explained during their group therapy session. "Emotional responses to trauma get labeled as mental illness. Financial confusion gets called incompetence. Questioning authority gets called paranoia." But it was Sarah who gave Sophia the most crucial piece of advice. "Document everything, every conversation, every treatment, every interaction. If you survive this, you'll need evidence that you were competent and coherent throughout the entire process." Sophia began writing immediately, using the small notebook they had allowed her to keep. She documented every conversation with staff, every medication they tried to give her, which she refused, every symptom they claimed to observe. On her second day, she witnessed Emma's performance for the medical staff. Through the common room window, she watched Emma arrive with Richard, carrying what appeared to be personal items from Sophia's closet. "I thought she might want some of her own clothes," Emma told the nurses, her voice carrying clearly through the thin walls. "I've been trying to be supportive, but I have to admit, I'm frightened of her increasingly violent threats." Violent threats. Sophia had never threatened anyone in her life. Emma continued her performance. "She's been obsessing over financial records, claiming that millions of dollars are missing from their charity. Richard has had forensic accountants review everything, of course, and the funds are all properly allocated. But she becomes enraged when presented with evidence that contradicts her delusions." The lies were so smooth, so believable, that Sophia almost started doubting her own memories. Almost. But that afternoon, something miraculous happened. James Mitchell appeared in the visitor's room, having somehow convinced the staff that he was Sophia's cousin from out of town. "I have 15 minutes before they figure out I'm not family," he said quietly, sliding into the chair across from her. "Maria Santos contacted me. She gave me copies of everything you found in Richard's safe." Sophia's heart raced. "Have you verified the documents?" "I've been working on it for 36 hours straight." "Sophia, this is bigger than embezzlement from one charity. Richard has been running a systematic fraud operation across multiple foundations for at least 5 years. The FBI is already investigating based on the evidence Maria provided. But I'm trapped in here while Emma takes over my life." "Not for long. I've been in contact with your mother. She's hired a new legal team, and they're filing for your immediate release based on unlawful detention. Dr. Wells cut her conference short and is flying back tonight to provide testimony about your mental state." James leaned forward, his voice urgent. "But Sophia, you need to know, Emma has been destroying evidence. She's had a moving truck at your penthouse since yesterday, removing financial records and personal items. She's claiming it's for your own safety, to reduce your stress triggers." The systematic destruction of her life was continuing, even while she was locked away, unable to fight back. "There's something else," James continued. "I did some background research on Emma Sterling. She's not who she claims to be. What do you mean Emma Sterling died in a car accident in Switzerland 3 years ago? The woman who's been your friend, who's been destroying your life, has been using a stolen identity. The revelation hit Sophia like a physical blow. Not only had her best friend betrayed her, but her best friend didn't even exist. Who is she really? Her real name is Emma Hartwell. She's Richard's half-sister. The world tilted around Sophia. Emma wasn't just Richard's mistress. She was his sister. This wasn't about love or passion. This was about family money, inheritance, and a level of calculated cruelty that went beyond anything Sophia had imagined. The affair was fake, Sophia whispered. All of it, the romantic messages, the hotel receipts, everything. It was all designed to look like infidelity to cover up what was really happening. A family conspiracy to steal your inheritance and your daughter, James confirmed. But Sophia, we have them now. The financial evidence is solid, and once you're released, we can expose everything. But as James prepared to leave, alarms began ringing throughout the facility. Through the windows, Sophia could see ambulances arriving. A nurse rushed past their table, and Sophia heard her speaking into her radio. Pregnant patient in premature labor, 6 months gestation, need immediate transport to Mount Sinai. Sophia felt a sharp pain in her abdomen and looked down to see fluid pooling beneath her chair. "James," she gasped, "get me out of here. My daughter is coming." As the medical team rushed her toward the ambulance, Sophia caught a glimpse of Emma in the facility parking lot, talking urgently on her phone. Even from a distance, Sophia could see the satisfaction on her face. The final phase of Emma's plan was in motion. If something happened to Sophia during delivery, Richard would have complete control of their daughter and the remaining assets. But as the ambulance raced through Manhattan traffic toward the hospital, Sophia felt her daughter's strong kicks and realized that Grace was fighting too. They were in this battle together now, and Emma Hartwell had just made the mistake of underestimating both of them. Mount Sinai Hospital's emergency room became a battlefield at midnight. Sophia was rushed into labor and delivery while James Mitchell frantically called her mother and Dr. Wells. At 28 weeks pregnant, baby Grace was fighting for her life, and Sophia was fighting for both of them. "Mrs. Hartwell, we need to perform an emergency C-section," Dr. Martinez explained, her face grave. "The baby's heart rate is dropping, and your stress levels are dangerously high. We need to get her out now." Through the pain and terror, Sophia managed to grab Dr. Martinez's hand. "Whatever happens to me, don't let Richard take her. Promise me. There are legal documents. Focus on breathing, Mrs. Hartwell. Let us handle the medical emergency." But even as Sophia was wheeled into surgery, she could see Richard arriving in the hallway with a briefcase full of legal documents. He had been prepared for this moment, ready to claim custody of Grace the instant she was born. The next 4 hours blurred together in a haze of surgery, recovery, and the sound of her daughter's tiny cries from the NICU. Grace Elizabeth Hartwell entered the world weighing only 3 pounds, but her lungs were strong and her spirit was fierce. "She's a fighter," the neonatologist told Sophia as they sat beside Grace's incubator. "Premature, but healthy. She's going to need to stay in the NICU for several weeks, but her prognosis is excellent." Looking at her daughter, so small but so perfect, Sophia felt a strength she had never known she possessed. This tiny girl was depending on her mother to protect her from the people who had already stolen her inheritance and were now trying to steal her future. But Richard was relentless. Even as Sophia recovered from surgery, he arrived with custody papers and a court order for immediate paternity testing. "I'm sorry, Sophia, but given your recent psychiatric hold and the premature birth caused by your instability, the court has granted me temporary emergency custody," Richard announced, flanked by Helena Richardson and 2 security guards. "Richard, she's in the NICU. She can't be moved. The court order allows me to make all medical decisions and determine visitation rights. You'll be allowed to see Grace for 2 hours per day, supervised by hospital staff." The cruelty was breathtaking. Sophia had just given birth to their daughter, and Richard was immediately limiting her access to her own child. But as the security guard handed Sophia the court documents, she noticed something that made her heart race. The papers were filed under Richard's full legal name, Richard Hartwell Sterling. Sterling. Sophia looked up at Richard with new understanding. You're related to Emma. She's not your mistress. She's your sister. Richard's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing panic underneath. You're confused from the medication. Sophia. Emma Sterling is my business partner. Emma Sterling is dead. Richard. She died 3 years ago in Switzerland. The woman who's been destroying my life is your half-sister, Emma Hartwell Sterling. Helena Richardson stepped forward quickly. Mrs. Hartwell, you're clearly disoriented from the surgery and the medication. These paranoid delusions are exactly why the court granted emergency custody to your husband. But Sophia was thinking clearly for the first time in months. What was your father's name? Richard. Your biological father, before your mother married the man who adopted you? The silence in the room was deafening. Charles Sterling, Sophia continued, the pieces falling into place. He had 2 children from his first marriage before he met your mother, Emma and someone else. That's why Emma knew so much about your business, why she could manipulate the financial system so easily. She's not trying to steal your fortune. Richard, she's trying to reclaim her inheritance. Richard's face went white. You don't know what you're talking about. Your father cut Emma and her brother out of his will when he divorced their mother to marry yours. They've been planning this revenge for decades, haven't they? And you were stupid enough to think you were using her, when she was actually using you. The revelation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Richard had been as manipulated as Sophia, just in a different way. But before anyone could respond, James Mitchell burst into the room with Dr. Wells and Sophia's mother, Diane, along with someone Sophia didn't recognize, a stern-looking woman in a federal agent's badge. Nobody move, the FBI agent announced. Richard Hartwell, you're under arrest for embezzlement, wire fraud, and money laundering. Helena Richardson, you're under arrest as an accessory to fraud. As handcuffs were placed on Richard's wrists, he looked at Sophia with something that might have been regret. I never meant for it to go this far, he said quietly. Emma convinced me you would be happier with a simple life, that the money and social pressure were making you miserable anyway. I was miserable because my husband and best friend were systematically destroying my self-confidence and stealing my inheritance. Sophia replied, but you know what? Richard, I'm not miserable anymore. I'm furious, and fury is much more useful than misery. Dr. Wells approached Sophia's bed, her face gentle but determined. Sophia, I've reviewed all the psychiatric facility's records. There is absolutely no evidence of mental instability or incompetence. You were unlawfully detained, and I'm prepared to testify to that in court. What about Emma? Sophia asked the FBI agent. Emma Hartwell Sterling is being arrested as we speak. Turns out she's been running similar fraud operations in 3 other states. Your case broke open a much larger investigation. As Richard and Helena were led away in handcuffs, Sophia felt something she hadn't experienced in years: vindication. But the victory was complicated by exhaustion and worry for her daughter. Diane sat beside Sophia's bed, taking her hand gently. I'm so proud of you, honey. You survived something that would have destroyed most people. I almost didn't survive it, Mom. If James hadn't found those financial records, if Dr. Wells hadn't come back early, if Grace hadn't forced this crisis that brought everything into the open. But you did survive it, and now you're going to rebuild. That night, sitting beside Grace's incubator in the NICU, Sophia began planning her new life. She had her daughter, she had her mother's support, and she had James Mitchell, who had risked his career to investigate her case and was now holding her hand while they watched Grace sleep. But most importantly, she had herself back. The woman Richard and Emma had tried to destroy was gone, replaced by someone stronger, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous to anyone who might try to hurt her family. As Grace's tiny fingers wrapped around Sophia's finger through the incubator opening, Sophia made a silent promise. Her daughter would grow up knowing that her mother was a woman who fought back, who didn't accept lies or manipulation, who protected what mattered most. The battle was won, but the war wasn't over. Emma's arrest was just the beginning of unraveling the full extent of the Sterling family conspiracy. And somewhere in a federal holding cell, Emma was probably already planning her next move. But for the first time in 2 years, Sophia wasn't afraid. She was ready. 3 weeks after Grace's birth, Sophia sat in the federal courthouse, watching Emma Hartwell Sterling's empire collapse in real time. The media had dubbed it the Billionaire baby scandal, and courtroom sketches of Emma being led away in handcuffs were splashed across every newspaper in Manhattan. Emma looked different in her orange jumpsuit, smaller, more fragile, stripped of the designer clothes and confident demeanor that had made her so convincing as Sophia's best friend. But her eyes still held the calculating intelligence that had nearly destroyed Sophia's life. "Your Honor," Emma's defense attorney was arguing, "my client was subjected to decades of psychological abuse by the Hartwell family. Charles Sterling abandoned Emma and her brother when they were children, leaving them in poverty while lavishing wealth on his new family. This was never about money, it was about justice." Sophia almost felt sorry for her until she remembered the systematic cruelty, the fake pregnancy, the calculated destruction of her mental health and marriage. James Mitchell squeezed her hand as the prosecutor presented the evidence they had gathered together. Financial records showing the embezzlement of over $40 million from various charities. Documentation of identity theft. Proof of the conspiracy to commit fraud and manipulate custody proceedings. Emma Sterling died in a car accident in Zurich 3 years ago, the prosecutor explained to the jury. The defendant stole her identity, her background, even her college transcripts to infiltrate Sophia Hartwell's life. This wasn't a crime of passion or desperation. It was a multi-year criminal enterprise designed to steal a family's entire fortune. When Emma finally took the stand in her own defense, Sophia was struck by how easily she slipped back into the persona of the wrong victim. "I love Sophia like a sister," Emma said, tears streaming down her face. "Everything I did was to protect her from Richard's manipulation. He convinced me that she was mentally unstable, that she needed to be isolated for her own safety. I thought I was helping her." Even now, even facing federal charges, Emma was trying to manipulate the narrative. But Sophia no longer felt the confusion and self-doubt that Emma's lies had once triggered. She saw the performance clearly now, the calculated tears, the strategic vulnerability, the way Emma positioned herself as both victim and hero in her own story. During cross-examination, the prosecutor systematically dismantled Emma's defense. "Ms. Hartwell Sterling, is it true that you photographed Mrs. Hartwell during private moments over a 2-year period? I was documenting concerning behaviors. Is it true that you encouraged Mrs. Hartwell to seek therapy and then attempted to use those therapy sessions as evidence of mental instability? I thought she needed help. Is it true that you used a fake pregnancy to manipulate both Mr. Hartwell and Mrs. Hartwell during their custody dispute?" For the first time, Emma hesitated. The pregnancy was, it was complicated. "Ms. Hartwell Sterling, did you or did you not fake a pregnancy using prosthetic devices and hormone injections?" "Yes, but..." No further questions. As Emma was led back to the defendant's table, she caught Sophia's eyes across the courtroom. For just a moment, her mask fell completely, and Sophia saw the rage and hatred that had always been hidden beneath the concerned friend persona. But Sophia no longer felt intimidated. She held Emma's gaze steadily until Emma looked away. The verdict came after only 6 hours of deliberation, guilty on all counts. Emma was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for fraud, embezzlement, identity theft, and conspiracy. Outside the courthouse, Sophia faced a wall of reporters and cameras. James stood beside her, along with her mother and Dr. Wells, as she read a prepared statement. For 2 years, Emma Hartwell Sterling systematically destroyed my confidence, my marriage, and my sense of reality. She weaponized my trust, my friendship, and even my desire to be a good mother against me. But she made one crucial mistake. She underestimated the strength of a woman fighting for her child. The questions came rapid fire. Mrs. Hartwell, what's next for you and baby Grace? Will you rebuild the Hartwell Foundation? Are you planning to write a book about your experience? How do you feel about your ex-husband's cooperation with federal investigators? Sophia answered what she could, but her mind was focused on the future. Richard had been sentenced to 8 years for his role in the embezzlement scheme, but his cooperation with investigators had reduced his sentence significantly. More importantly, he had signed over full custody of Grace and agreed to a complete financial settlement that returned Sophia's grandmother's trust fund and awarded her 60% of the marital assets. As they walked away from the courthouse, James put his arm around Sophia's shoulders. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Like I can breathe again," Sophia replied. "For the first time in 2 years, I'm not looking over my shoulder, wondering what lies are being told about me or what evidence is being manufactured." That evening, they celebrated at Sophia's new apartment in Westchester, smaller than the Manhattan penthouse, but filled with light and peace. Grace, now healthy enough to come home from the NICU, slept peacefully in Sophia's arms while Diane cooked dinner and James worked on his laptop, writing the investigative series that would expose the larger network of charity fraud that Emma had been running. "I have something to tell you," James said during dinner. "The book publisher wants to offer you a deal for your memoir. They're calling it Betrayed Billions, A Mother's Fight for Truth. I don't know if I'm ready to relive all of this in print. You don't have to decide now. But Sophia, your story could help other women recognize the signs of systematic manipulation. Emma's tactics weren't unique. They're part of a pattern that predators use to isolate and control their victims." Dr. Wells, who had joined them for dinner, nodded in agreement. "In my practice, I see women who have been gaslit and manipulated by people they trusted. Your story, your survival and recovery, could be incredibly powerful for other survivors." As they talked about the future, Sophia felt something she hadn't experienced since before her marriage, genuine excitement about what came next. She was 38 years old with a 3-month-old daughter, rebuilding her life from scratch. It should have been terrifying, but instead it felt like freedom. "I want to restart the foundation," Sophia announced suddenly. "But this time, I wanted to help women who've been financially abused, women who've had their assets stolen or their children used against them in custody battles." "That's perfect," James smiled. "You could partner with domestic violence organizations, provide legal aid funding, maybe even lobbying for better protection laws." But as they were cleaning up from dinner, Sophia's phone rang. An unknown number with the international country code. "Mrs. Hartwell." The voice was unfamiliar, with a slight European accent. "This is Victoria Sterling. I believe you knew my daughter, Emma." Sophia's blood ran cold. "Emma is in federal prison." "Yes, I'm aware. I'm calling because there are some things about my family that you need to understand. Emma was not acting alone. Mrs. Hartwell, the Sterling family has been planning this operation for over 20 years. My daughter was just the first phase." "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about my 3 sons, Mrs. Hartwell, Emma's brothers. They're already in position in your new life, waiting for the right moment to continue what Emma started." The line went dead, leaving Sophia staring at her phone in shock. James looked up from his laptop. "Who was that?" "I think," Sophia said slowly, "our victory might have been premature." As if on cue, there was a knock at the door. Through the peephole, Sophia could see a delivery man with a large floral arrangement, but something about his face seemed familiar. She opened the door cautiously, and the man smiled, a smile that reminded her chillingly of Emma's calculated warmth. "Congratulations on your court victory, Mrs. Hartwell," he said pleasantly. "These are from an admirer, someone who's been watching your strength and resilience with great interest." As he walked away, Sophia looked at the card attached to the flowers. The game isn't over. Sophia, it's just beginning. Welcome to Phase 2, the Sterling Brothers. Sophia closed the door and locked it, her heart racing. Emma's arrest hadn't been the end of the conspiracy. It had been the beginning of something much larger and more dangerous. But as she looked at her sleeping daughter and the people who had become her chosen family, Sophia realized something important. She wasn't the same woman who had been blindsided by Emma's betrayal. She was stronger now, smarter, and surrounded by people who actually cared about her welfare. Let the Sterling brothers come. Sophia Hartwell was ready for whatever they had planned. The disappearance happened on a Tuesday morning in March, exactly 6 months after Emma's conviction. Sophia had been at her weekly therapy appointment with Dr. Wells, discussing her progress in rebuilding her life and her relationship with James, when her phone rang with a call that changed everything. Mrs. Hartwell, this is Detective Rodriguez with the NYPD. We need you to come to your apartment immediately. There's been an incident. Sophia's heart dropped. Is Grace okay? Is my mother? Ma'am, your daughter appears to be missing. Your mother is fine, but she's been hospitalized. She was found unconscious in your apartment. The drive from Manhattan to Westchester became a blur of sirens and panic. James held Sophia's hand as they raced toward what remained of her life, while she tried to process what Detective Rodriguez had told her over the phone. Diane had been found unconscious in the nursery, apparently drugged with something that left her temporarily paralyzed but conscious. She had been able to watch, helpless, as two men she described as having Emma's eyes and smile, carefully packed Grace's belongings and carried the 8-month-old baby away. They had left behind a note, written in handwriting that looked disturbingly like Emma's. Richard always said Grace would be better off with a simple life. We're going to make sure she gets one, far away from your toxic influence. Don't try to find us. At the hospital, Diane was conscious but shaken. They knew exactly where everything was, she told Sophia, her voice weak from whatever drug they had used. Grace's bottles, her favorite blankets, her medical records. They'd been watching us, studying our routines. What did they look like? Tall, dark hair, expensive clothes, professional. They moved like they'd done this before. And Sophia, they knew Grace's schedule perfectly. They knew she'd be napping, knew I'd be alone. This wasn't random. Detective Rodriguez pulled Sophia aside. Mrs. Hartwell, we need to discuss the possibility that your ex-husband was involved in this. He's been moved to a minimum security federal facility, and he's had several visitors in the past month. Richard wouldn't hurt Grace. Whatever else he's done, he loves his daughter. Maybe, but the timing is suspicious. Emma Sterling's appeal was denied last week. Her brothers might be accelerating their timeline. The investigation moved quickly once federal agents became involved. James used his investigative skills to track the Sterling brothers' identities. Marcus Sterling, a businessman based in Switzerland, David Sterling, a lawyer in London, and Thomas Sterling, whose background seemed to disappear entirely after college. They've been planning this for decades, James explained as they sat in the FBI field office, surrounded by photos and financial records. After their father abandoned them, they spent years building new identities, establishing international businesses, creating the infrastructure for exactly this kind of operation. Agent Sarah Chen, who had taken over the case, spread out a map of potential escape routes. The good news is that traveling internationally with an infant is complicated, especially when that infant has been reported as kidnapped. They'll need documentation, medical supplies, and they'll have to move carefully. The bad news, Sophia asked. The Sterling brothers have been preparing for this scenario for 20 years. They have resources, safe houses, and legal systems in place that we're only beginning to understand. But the breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Richard himself. During a prison video call, he looked haggard and genuinely remorseful. Sophia, I need you to know that I didn't plan this. Emma's brothers contacted me, said they just wanted to meet Grace, to give her gifts from her aunt. I thought they were trying to make amends. Where are they? Richard, there's a property in Tuscany. Charles Sterling bought it decades ago, before he divorced Emma's mother. It's been in the family trust ever since, but it's not under any of their current names. It's registered under an old company called Meridian Holdings. Agent Chen was already pulling up property records. Tuscany, Italy. That's a non-extradition jurisdiction for certain types of kidnapping cases. If they can establish residency there, we need to go now, Sophia said firmly. Mrs. Hartwell, this is a federal investigation. We can't just... Agent Chen, with all due respect, my daughter has been missing for 18 hours. Every minute we spend on bureaucracy is a minute they're using to disappear forever. James stood up beside her. I have contacts in the Italian press. If we can get there and document what's happening, create international pressure. And I'm coming with you, Diane announced from the doorway, looking much stronger than she had that morning. Those men drugged me and stole my granddaughter. Nobody does that to my family. 12 hours later, Sophia found herself on a private jet heading toward Rome, accompanied by James, her mother, Agent Chen, and 2 other federal investigators. The Sterling brothers had made one crucial mistake. They had underestimated how far a mother would go to reclaim her child. The Tuscany villa was everything Richard had described: isolated, beautiful, and nearly impossible to approach without being seen. But James's contacts in the Italian media had been working throughout the night, and by the time they arrived, the property was surrounded by reporters and local police. Through binoculars, Sophia could see Grace playing in the villa's garden, apparently healthy and happy, being watched by a woman who looked like a professional nanny. The sight of her daughter, safe and unharmed, brought tears of relief to Sophia's eyes. Marcus Sterling emerged from the villa to speak with the Italian police, and Sophia was struck by how much he resembled Emma. The same calculating intelligence, the same ability to project concerned reasonableness while orchestrating cruelty. He's telling them that Grace is his niece, that Sophia is mentally unstable, and he's protecting the child from an unfit mother. Agent Chen translated as they listened to the conversation. He has forged documents showing that Richard signed over custody to him. Can they hold Grace based on forged documents? Not for long, but long enough for the Sterling brothers to disappear again. We need to act now. What happened next would be remembered as one of the most dramatic custody recoveries in international law enforcement history. Sophia, wearing a wire and accompanied by Italian police, walked up to the villa's front door and rang the bell. Marcus Sterling answered, and his face went through a series of expressions: surprise, calculation, and finally resignation. "Hello, Marcus," Sophia said calmly. "I've come for my daughter." "Sophia, you look well. Prison must not have been too difficult for Emma. She always said you were stronger than you appeared." "Emma was wrong about a lot of things. May I see Grace?" "Of course. She's been asking for her mama." As they walked through the villa, Marcus kept up a steady stream of conversation, probably trying to manipulate the situation even now. "You know, we never intended for things to go as far as they did. Emma got obsessed. She was supposed to simply document Richard's financial irregularities, help us reclaim what our father stole from us. But she began to see you as the symbol of everything we lost. And now Emma is in prison. Richard is in prison. And 3 little children have lost their parents because of our family's generational trauma. Perhaps it's time to end this cycle." They found Grace in the garden, playing with blocks under the watchful eye of the nanny. When she saw Sophia, her face lit up with joy. "Mama." Sophia scooped up her daughter, feeling complete for the first time in days. Grace was healthy, clean, obviously well cared for. But Sophia could see the confusion in her eyes at being in a strange place with unfamiliar people. "We take good care of her," Marcus said softly. "We're not monsters. Sophia, we're just damaged people who made terrible choices, then make a better choice now. Let us go home." Marcus Sterling looked at his brothers, who had appeared in the garden doorway. then at the Italian police officers surrounding the property, then finally at Grace, who was clinging to her mother with relief and love. "Yes," he said finally, "I think it's time to let this story end." The flight home was quiet. Grace slept in Sophia's arms while James worked on his laptop, documenting the international conspiracy that had finally been brought to light. Agent Chen reviewed the agreements that had been signed, ensuring that the Sterling brothers would face appropriate consequences for their actions. But Sophia barely registered any of it. She was focused entirely on her daughter's breathing, her warmth, the miracle of having her back safe and unharmed. As they flew over the Atlantic, heading home to their new life, Sophia realized that she had survived something that should have destroyed her. She had been betrayed by her husband, manipulated by her best friend, drugged and imprisoned, had her child stolen, and chased international criminals across continents to reclaim her family. And she had won. Not just survived, but won. Whatever came next, Sophia knew she could handle it. She was no longer the naive woman who had trusted too easily and questioned her own perceptions. She was a mother who had fought across continents for her child, and there was nothing more powerful in the world than that. 1 year later, Sophia stood in the sunlit offices of the Grace Foundation, named after her daughter and dedicated to helping mothers who had experienced financial abuse and custody manipulation. The irony wasn't lost on her that the Sterling family's attempted destruction of her life had instead given her the purpose and platform to help thousands of other women. "Mrs. Mitchell," her assistant called out. Sophia had taken James's name when they married 6 months earlier in a small ceremony in her mother's garden. "The reporter from 60 Minutes is here for your interview." The past year had been a whirlwind of recovery, rebuilding, and unexpected opportunities. Her memoir, Betrayed Billions: A Mother's Fight for Truth, had become a bestseller, spending 16 weeks on the New York Times list. The book deal had provided the seed money for the foundation, but more importantly, it had connected her with thousands of women who had survived similar systematic manipulation. Grace, now 18 months old, toddled around the office like she owned it, charming staff and volunteers with her fearless curiosity and infectious laugh. She showed no lasting effects from her kidnapping experience, though Sophia remained vigilant about security and had learned to trust her instincts about people in ways she never had before. "Mama?" Grace called out as she spotted Sophia across the room, abandoning her blocks to run toward her mother with arms outstretched. Sophia scooped up her daughter, marveling at how strong and healthy she had become. The premature birth that had once terrified her was now just another part of their origin story. Grace had been fighting from her very first breath, and she hadn't stopped fighting since. The 60 Minutes interview was scheduled to coincide with the Foundation's first major legislative victory, a bill requiring family courts to receive training on financial abuse and coercive control. Emma's tactics, it turned out, were not unique. Across the country, women were being systematically isolated, gaslit, and manipulated out of their assets and their children by people who used their trust and love as weapons. "Sophia," James called from his office, where he was finishing up a phone call. "The FBI wants to schedule a follow-up interview about the Sterling Brothers International Network. Apparently, the investigation has expanded to include similar operations in 5 other countries." The Sterling brothers were all serving prison sentences now: Marcus in Italy, David in London, and Thomas, who had been captured trying to flee to a non-extradition country, in federal prison in the United States. But their network had been extensive, and investigators were still unraveling the full scope of their operations. Emma remained in federal prison, but she had been sending letters, first to Sophia, then to Grace when Sophia refused to read them. The letters were a mixture of apology, justification, and what Dr. Wells recognized as continued manipulation attempts. Sophia had them forwarded directly to the FBI as evidence, but she sometimes wondered if Emma truly understood the scope of the damage she had caused, or if she saw herself as the victim in their story even now. Richard's story was more complicated. He had served his sentence and was now living quietly in Vermont, working as a bookkeeper for a small nonprofit. He sent child support payments religiously and had requested supervised visitation with Grace, which Sophia had agreed to after extensive discussion with Dr. Wells and careful consideration of what would be best for her daughter. The first visit had been awkward and painful, but Richard's remorse seemed genuine. He had lost everything: his business empire, his social position, his marriage, and his daughter's daily presence, and the experience appeared to have fundamentally changed him. "I don't expect forgiveness," he had told Sophia during one of their carefully supervised meetings, "but I want Grace to know that her father takes full responsibility for the choices that hurt her mother. When she's old enough to understand, I want her to know that loving someone doesn't give you the right to control or manipulate them." It wasn't enough to repair the damage he had caused, but it was a start toward ensuring that Grace would grow up understanding healthy relationship dynamics. Dr. Wells had become not just Sophia's therapist, but a close friend and advisor for the foundation. Her expertise in recognizing and treating the effects of systematic manipulation had been crucial in developing the foundation's programs. "The most important thing we can teach these women," Dr. Wells explained to the 60 Minutes cameras, "is that their perceptions were accurate. They weren't crazy. They weren't overreacting. They weren't imagining the manipulation. Trusting your instincts isn't paranoia, it's survival." Diane had moved from Phoenix to Westchester, buying a small house within walking distance of Sophia and James's home. At 72, she had found new purpose in helping other grandmothers navigate custody disputes and financial abuse situations. Her direct, no-nonsense approach and fierce protective instincts made her a formidable advocate. "Nobody messes with my family," she had become famous for saying in interviews. "And now, every woman who comes to this foundation is part of my family." As the 60 Minutes interview wrapped up, Sophia reflected on how dramatically her life had changed. 2 years ago, she had been a wealthy but isolated woman whose greatest ambition was hosting successful charity galas. Now she was running a nationally recognized foundation, married to a man who had risked his career to help her, and raising her daughter to be strong, independent, and skeptical of anyone who tried to tell her she was imagining things. The apartment building she and James had purchased in Westchester had been converted into transitional housing for women escaping financial abuse. The top floor served as their family home, while the other floors provided safe, temporary housing for mothers and children who were rebuilding their lives after systematic manipulation. That evening, as they sat in their living room watching Grace play with blocks, she was building increasingly complex structures, showing an engineer's mind that reminded Sophia of her own grandmother. James brought up something that had been weighing on his mind. "Sophia, I've been offered a position with the Washington Post, investigating international financial crimes. It would mean moving to D.C., but it would also mean being at the center of legislative efforts to strengthen protections for financial abuse victims." Sophia considered the opportunity. The Grace Foundation was now established enough to operate with her oversight rather than requiring her daily presence, and the chance to influence policy at the federal level was appealing. "What do you think about D.C., Grace?" Sophia asked her daughter. Grace looked up from her blocks and smiled. "Adventure, Mama." It was settled. The next phase of their life would be in Washington, D.C., where Sophia could testify before Congress, work with federal agencies, and continue building the movement that had grown out of her personal tragedy. But as they were discussing logistics and timelines, there was a knock at the door. Through the security camera system James had insisted on installing, they could see a woman in her 60s, well-dressed and carrying what appeared to be legal documents. "Mrs. Mitchell," the woman said when Sophia opened the door cautiously. "My name is Victoria Sterling. I believe you knew my daughter, Emma." Sophia's blood froze. This was the woman who had called her months ago, warning about Emma's brothers. The woman who had implied that the Sterling family conspiracy was larger than anyone had imagined. "What do you want?" Victoria Sterling smiled, and Sophia could see Emma's calculated warmth in her expression. "I want to offer you a job, Mrs. Mitchell. You see, The Sterling family business is much larger than my children's amateur attempts at revenge, and we could use someone with your particular skills and experience. Get off my property. Mrs. Mitchell, you've built something impressive with your foundation, but imagine what you could accomplish with real resources, real power. The Sterling family controls assets worth over $2 billion. Money that could help thousands of women instead of the dozens you're reaching now. Sophia felt James move behind her, ready to intervene if necessary. The answer is no, Mrs. Sterling. Whatever you're offering, whatever you're planning, the answer will always be no. Victoria Sterling nodded, as if she had expected this response. I understand, but Mrs. Mitchell, you should know that Emma and her brothers were the amateurs in our family. The real Sterling legacy is just beginning to unfold. As she walked away, she called back over her shoulder. Your foundation is doing beautiful work, Mrs. Mitchell. It would be a shame if something happened to your funding. Sophia closed the door and engaged all the security locks, her heart racing. That sounded like a threat, James said grimly. It was definitely a threat. But as Sophia looked at Grace, playing peacefully with her blocks, and at James, who had already pulled out his phone to call the FBI, she realized something important. She wasn't afraid. The Sterling family had taught her everything she needed to know about fighting people who used wealth and manipulation as weapons. They had made her stronger, smarter, and more dangerous than they could have imagined. If Victoria Sterling wanted to continue the family tradition of systematic destruction, she was about to learn that Sophia Mitchell was no longer the woman Emma had tried to destroy. The war wasn't over, but Sophia was ready for whatever came next. 2 years later, on a perfect September morning in Washington, D.C., Sophia Mitchell stood in the Rose Garden of the White House, preparing to witness the signing of the Financial Abuse Prevention Act, legislation that her testimony had helped shape and that her foundation had lobbied for tirelessly. Grace, now 3 years old, sat on James's shoulders, waving at the cameras with the confidence of a child who had grown up believing that her voice mattered and that justice was always possible if you fought hard enough for it. The bill would require family courts to receive training on financial abuse, provide federal funding for legal aid in custody cases involving economic coercion, and establish criminal penalties for systematic financial manipulation within marriages. It wasn't everything Sophia had hoped for, but it was a significant step toward protecting other women from experiencing what she had survived. President Martinez smiled as she signed the bill into law. This legislation exists because survivors like Sophia Mitchell refuse to let their trauma be meaningless. They transform their pain into purpose, and today, thousands of families will be safer because of their courage. As cameras flashed and applause filled the garden, Sophia reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. 4 years ago, she had been a pregnant woman discovering her husband's betrayal during an ultrasound appointment. Today, she was a nationally recognized advocate, married to a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist, raising a daughter who had never known a world where women didn't fight back. The Grace Foundation, now operated in 12 states, had helped over 3,000 women navigate custody disputes and financial abuse situations, and had established a legal defense fund that had won several precedent-setting cases. The memoir Sophia had been reluctant to write had not only become a bestseller, but had been adapted into a limited series that was filming its second season. But the most meaningful change was personal. Sophia had learned to trust her instincts, to recognize manipulation tactics before they could take hold, and to build relationships based on genuine mutual respect rather than dependency or fear. Dr. Wells, now the Foundation's chief psychological consultant, had helped Sophia understand that her survival hadn't been luck. It had been the result of an inner strength that Emma and Richard's manipulation had tried to suppress but never truly destroyed. Trauma doesn't make you weak. Dr. Wells often told the women they worked with, surviving trauma makes you powerful. The question is what you choose to do with that power. James had used his platform at the Washington Post to expose international networks of financial manipulation, building on the Sterling family investigation to reveal similar operations in 8 countries. His work had led to over 40 arrests and the recovery of hundreds of millions of dollars in stolen assets. Richard had completed his sentence and was now living quietly in Vermont, working as a financial advisor for a nonprofit credit union. His relationship with Grace was carefully structured, supervised visits twice a month, with conversations focused on age-appropriate activities rather than the adult complexities of their family history. During their most recent visit, he had given Grace a small wooden jewelry box he had made in a prison woodworking class. "This is for you to keep special things in," he had told her. "Things that make you happy and remind you how strong you are." Grace had filled it with drawings she had made, a photo of herself with Sophia and James, and a small stone she had found during a hike with her grandmother Diane. It wasn't the relationship Sophia had once imagined Richard would have with their daughter, but it was honest and unmanipulated, which felt like progress. Emma remained in federal prison, with 8 years left on her sentence. She had stopped writing letters after Sophia's memoir was published, perhaps finally understanding that her version of their friendship had been fundamentally different from reality. Through the prison grapevine, Sophia had heard that Emma was working toward a psychology degree, apparently finding some form of redemption in studying the manipulation tactics she had once employed. The Sterling brothers had each received sentences ranging from 12 to 20 years, depending on their level of involvement in the international conspiracy. The full extent of their operations was still being unraveled by authorities in multiple countries, but the investigation had led to new international protocols for tracking financial abuse and child abduction cases. Victoria Sterling had disappeared after her threatening visit to Sophia's home 2 years earlier. FBI investigations had revealed that she had died in a car accident in Monaco 6 months later, though whether it was actually an accident remained unclear. Her death had ended the Sterling family's organized criminal activities, but it had also left questions about other operations they might have initiated that were still active. As the White House ceremony concluded, Sophia and her family walked through the streets of Durham, RC, Grace insisting on walking by herself like a big girl while holding both her parents' hands. "Mama," Grace asked, "why were all those people taking pictures of us?" "Because sometimes, when people work really hard to help other people, it becomes news that other people want to hear about. Are we helping people? We're trying to, sweetheart. We're trying to make sure that mamas and their babies can be safe together." Grace nodded seriously, processing this information with the gravity of a child who had grown up around conversations about justice and protection. That evening, they celebrated at their favorite family restaurant, joined by Diane, Dr. Wells, and several colleagues from the foundation. The conversation was light and celebratory, focused on the legislative victory and future plans for expansion. But as they were preparing to leave, a woman approached their table. She was young, maybe 25, with the kind of nervous energy that Sophia recognized from women who had been systematically manipulated and were still learning to trust their own perceptions. "Mrs. Ott Mitchell, I'm sorry to interrupt your celebration, but I wanted to thank you. I read your book 6 months ago, and it helped me recognize what was happening in my marriage. I left my husband 3 weeks ago, and I'm rebuilding my life with my 2-year-old son." Sophia stood and embraced the young woman, feeling the familiar mixture of pride and heartbreak that came with meeting survivors. "You did the hard part," Sophia told her. "You trusted yourself and took action to protect your family. That takes incredible courage." "I have your book with me," the woman continued, pulling a well-worn copy from her purse. "Would you sign it? It's become like a survival manual for me." As Sophia signed the book, she wrote, "Trust your instincts, protect your power, build your chosen family. You are stronger than you know." Sophia Mitchell. Driving home that night, with Grace asleep in her car seat and James quiet beside her, Sophia felt the profound satisfaction that came from transforming trauma into purpose. The naive woman who had trusted too easily and questioned her own perceptions was gone. In her place was someone who had learned to fight, to protect, and to help others find their own strength. But as they pulled into their driveway, Sophia noticed something that made her pause. A black sedan was parked across the street, with 2 figures sitting inside. When they noticed Sophia looking at them, they drove away quickly. "James, did you see that car?" Yeah, I got the license plate. I'll call it in tomorrow. It was probably nothing. Journalists, researchers, or even supporters who were too shy to approach directly. But Sophia had learned to pay attention to details that once might have seemed insignificant. As they carried sleeping Grace into the house, Sophia felt the familiar alertness that had kept her family safe for the past 4 years. She had built a beautiful life from the ashes of systematic betrayal, but she remained vigilant, aware that people who sought to control and manipulate others through wealth and legal systems would always exist. The difference was that now she knew how to recognize them, how to fight them, and how to win. Later that night, as she checked on Grace one final time before bed, Sophia found a note tucked under her daughter's pillow. It was written in a handwriting she didn't recognize. Mrs. Mitchell, your work with the foundation has been impressive, but you've only scratched the surface of what's possible. There are networks of financial manipulation that make the Sterling family look like amateurs. If you're interested in taking your fight to the international level, there are people who could use your expertise. Consider this an invitation to play a much larger game. A friend. Sophia stared at the note, her mind racing. Someone had been inside their house, had accessed Grace's bedroom, had left a message that felt both like an opportunity and a threat. But as she looked at her sleeping daughter, peaceful and safe in her bed, Sophia realized that her answer was the same as it had always been since the day she discovered Richard's betrayal. She would do whatever was necessary to protect her family and help other families protect themselves. If there were larger networks of predators using wealth and legal systems to destroy families, then those networks needed to be exposed and stopped. If someone was inviting her to join a fight at the international level, then maybe it was time to take the battle global. Sophia quietly removed the note from Grace's room and walked to her home office, where she began researching international financial abuse cases and the organizations working to combat them. The Sterling family had taught her everything she needed to know about fighting people who used money and manipulation as weapons. Now it was time to use those skills on a global scale. The war wasn't over. It was just expanding. And Sophia Mitchell was ready for whatever came next. Turchoen. Epilogue. 5 years after the White House ceremony, Grace Mitchell Hartwell stood in her second-grade classroom, presenting her project on Heroes in My Family to her classmates. My mom is a hero because she helps mamas who are in trouble, Grace explained confidently, pointing to her poster covered with photos of Sophia speaking at conferences, testifying before Congress, and working with families around the world. She teaches them how to be strong and how to protect their babies. And she teaches them that when people try to tell you you're imagining things, you should trust yourself instead. The teacher smiled, recognizing the wisdom that came from a child who had grown up in a family that valued truth, justice, and the power of fighting back against those who sought to cause harm. Grace's poster also included photos of James receiving journalism awards, Diane volunteering at the foundation, Dr. Wells speaking at conferences, and even Richard during one of their supervised visits, because Grace was learning that families could be complicated, but that love and accountability could coexist. But the centerpiece of Grace's project was a photo of herself, taken just the week before, standing next to Sophia at the opening of the Grace Foundation's International Center for Financial Justice in Geneva, Switzerland. And someday, Grace concluded her presentation, I'm going to help families too, because my mama taught me that when bad people try to hurt families, good people have to fight back. The applause from her classmates was enthusiastic, but Grace was already thinking about her next project, a drawing she was making for her mama's birthday, showing the two of them as superheroes, flying around the world to help families stay safe together. Because in Grace's world, that's what superheroes did. They protected people who couldn't protect themselves. They fought against injustice, and they never, ever gave up. And in Grace's world, her mama was the strongest superhero of all.